So this afternoon, having looked at some of the harder to grasp concepts of Teilhard's vision, and then looked at his spiritual treatise, The Divine Milieu, we'd be looking just at some of his more purely mystical insights and effusions. This would be from an English version. It's called The Hymn of the Universe, which I used a lot when I was young. The English version, which has, as we'll see, some of his writings, mystical writings, including the Mass on the World, which is probably his most famous writing, and I think justly so. And then the latter part is excerpts by the editor from his various writings. We'll do a couple of those at the end. 82 different selections from various writings. On my dresser at home, I've had for many years Brother Lentz's icon of the Sacred Heart, which is rather distinctive. He quotes Teilhard at some length refers to Teilhard at some length on the back, which is of a Mayan-looking Christ, to show he's not just blonde, blue-eyed, with the planets in his hands, with all aflame, which we've been saying the universe is on fire, it's the Athens to the flames of the Spirit. So it's a very beautiful graphic depiction of the cosmic Christ and the fire of love, which animates not only his heart, but the whole universe through his heart. So I'll leave that for you to look at, if you like, at some point. So I'm going to be looking, first of all, to have an even deeper sense of Teilhard's awareness of the power, the spiritual power of matter, the spiritual content of matter. It's actually called The Spiritual Power of Matter, which he wrote already in 1919 when he was back in England for a brief time in Jersey. Not New Jersey, New Jersey. And he begins by quoting the Book of Kings, with the fiery chariot, the ascent of Elijah, which of course is a great mystical symbol not only for our own tradition, our own Christian tradition, but for our Jewish tradition as well, the Kabbalah, etc. Which is a good image for our ascent, in the fiery chariot, but the chariot, is material as well. So it's a poetic depiction of walking in the desert with the two companions walking in the desert, and then they felt this presence coming toward them. What was advancing towards them was the moving heart of an immeasurable, pervasive subtlety. So he fell to the ground, and a great silence fell around him. Then suddenly a breath of scorching air passed across his forehead, broke through the barrier of his closed eyelids, and penetrated his soul. The man felt that he was ceasing to be merely himself. An irresistible rapture took possession of him, as though all the sap of all living things, flowing at the same moment into the too narrow confines of his heart, was mightily refashioning the enfeebled fibers of his being. So who are we really, At the same time, the anguish of some superhuman peril oppressed him. It's overwhelming, right? A confused feeling that the force which had swept down upon him was equivocal, turbid, the combined essence of all evil and all goodness. Now that's interesting because, we talk about original sin and these vast passions that we've inherited from, over millions of years. Shadow work is really what he's talking about here. You've got to, these powers are potentially destructive and difficult. So they have to be treated with, respect, and it's really the dragon energies, serpentine energy that needs to be domesticated, or rather integrated. You can't domesticate a dragon, but it can be integrated. So the hurricane was within himself, and now in the very depths of the being it had invaded, the tempest of life, infinitely gentle, infinitely brutal, Life is both. Was murmuring to the one secret point in the soul which it had not altogether demolished. We're still aware here. You called me, here I am. You had need of me in order to grow. So that's a main theme in Teilhard. You're going to perish of inanition, as he says in one point, if you don't take matter seriously. This stuff, this vital energy that we're made of. You had need of me in order to grow. And then he says, and I was waiting for you in order to be made holy. Right? So it's through us and through the power of the Spirit in our own human nature, Christ working in us, that these, as I just explained, are intimated, that these energies are sanctified. So, always you have, without knowing it, desired me, and always I had been drawing you to me. I am the fire that consumes and the water that overthrows. So it consumes and overthrows all our limitations, all our, as he goes on to explain. They speak of me with scorn, calling me beggar woman or witch or harlot. But their words are at variance with life. And the Pharisees who condemn me waste away in their outlook to which they confine themselves. They die of inanition, exactly. And their disciples desert them because I am the essence of all that is tangible. And people cannot do without me. So, and nothing is precious save what is yourself in others, and others in yourself. Which is, all things. You have to see a connection to everything. Do you not feel my breath uprooting you and carrying you away? Up, man of God, make haste. For according to the way a man surrenders himself to it, the whirlwind will either drag him down into the darkness of its depths or lift him up into the blue skies. Your salvation and mine hang on this moment. Our salvation and the world's depends on how we respond to this. Take up your arms, O Israel, and do battle boldly against me. It's like Jacob wrestling with the angel. That's what it is in here. This musky smell of forests, the feverish atmosphere of cities, the sinister heady scent that rises up from nations in battle, all this writhed within its folds. A vapor gathered from the four corners of the earth. So there again you have the sense of all that's happening in the world is stuff for the transformation. Nothing is left out. It all has to be integrated, just as Christ took on everything, all the sin and the suffering and everything in the world. That has to be our path as well. The soul of the entire race shuddered within him. An obscure memory of first sudden awakening in the midst of beasts stronger, better armed than he. Cavemen, people fighting the saber-toothed tigers. That's all part of our collective memory of our collective, of our human experience. Because our human experience is human experience in general, altogether. The forces of nature, etc. So the sweetness of the first contact, he instinctively longed to lose himself in the warm wind which enfolded him. Now this wave of bliss in which he had all been melted was changed into a ruthless determination towards increased being. So it wasn't just there to intoxicate him or sweep him away, but to push him forward to greater life and greater being. So that's how it works. Son of earth, steep yourself in the sea of matter. Bathe in its fiery waters. For it is the source of your life and your youthfulness. You can't do without this energy. You thought the more thoroughly you rejected the tangible, the closer you would be to spirit. That you would be more divine if you lived in the world of pure thought. Or at least more angelic if you fled the corporeal. Well, you were like to have perished of hunger. You must have oil for your limbs, blood for your veins, water for your soul, the world of reality for your intellect. You not see that the very law of your own nature makes this a necessity for you? You can't do without it. You can't slough it off. You can't pretend it's not there. Even the resurrection of the body. It has to. So never say, as some say, the kingdom of matter is worn out. Never say, matter is accursed, matter is evil. Life shall spring forth out of death. And finally, the words which spell my definitive liberation, matter is speaking, the words which spell my definitive liberation, this is my body. So purity does not lie in separation from, but in the deeper penetration into the universe. Is to be found in the love of that unique, boundless essence which penetrates the inmost depths of all things. Purity lies in a chaste contact with that which is the same in all. Son of man, bathe yourself in the ocean of matter. Plunge into it where it's deepest and most violent. Struggle in its currents. Drink of its waters. For it cradled you long ago in your pre-conscious existence, the womb, and it is that ocean that will raise you up to God. So he goes on, he saw before his eyes, revealed with pitiless clarity, the ridiculous pretentiousness of human claims to order the life of the world, to impose on the world the dogmas, the standards, the conventions of mere men. He tasted sickeningly the triteness of people's joys and sorrows, the mean egoism of their pursuits, the insipidity of their passions. He who felt pity for those who take fright at the span of a century, or whose love is bounded by the frontiers of a nation. Sound familiar? So many things which once had distressed or revolted him, all seemed to him now merely ridiculous, non-existent, compared with this majestic reality, the flood of energy which now revealed itself to him, omnipresent, unalterable in its truth, relentless in its developments, untouchable in its serenity, eternal and unfailing in its protectiveness. All these seemingly contradictory things, brutal and nurturing at the same time, you know. A wave of triumph freed his soul. And then, what had seemed a blind and feral immensity was now becoming expressive and personal. Instead, the two amorphous expanses were being molded into features of an ineffable face. Here's where we get Genesis. A being was taking form in the totality of space. A being with the attractive power of a soul, palpable like a body and but vast as the sky. A being, and you know there's a traditional Orthodox on in the halo here, which you see on all Orthodox icons of Christ, which means he who is, I am, the being, so the being itself. A being of a higher order than the substance of things with which it is adorned, yet taking shape within those substances. The rising sun was being born in the heart of the world. God was shining forth from the summit of that world of matter, whose waves were carrying up to the world of spirit. Then he has a whole hymn to matter. Blessed be you, universal matter, immeasurable time, boundless ether, triple abyss of stars and atoms and generations, who by overflowing and dissolving our narrow standards of measurement reveal to us the dimensions of God. So it's a very eloquent poem. I acclaim you as the melodious fountain of water from which springs the soul, and as the limpid crystal whereof is fashioned the New Jerusalem. If we are ever to possess you, having taken you rapturously in our arms, we must then go on to sublimate you through sorrow. So oftentimes the sublimation of all this in Christ takes place through suffering. Raise me up then, matter, to those heights, through struggle and separation and death. Remember, all things work together here. Raise me up until at long last it becomes possible for me in perfect chastity to embrace the universe. And then it concludes with what happens in the Book of Kings. There's a cloak left on the ground, and the other person says, my father, as he ascends into heaven. So he wasn't ascending into heaven there. So having that sense of presence of God in matter, we can look at the Mass on the world, which, as I say, is the most simplest, which he did in China in 1923 when he was out in the desert. He had no bread and wine to celebrate Mass. So we've just been saying all along here, you know, the whole universe is the body of Christ, God is present, and also let's just consecrate the world. Which is what we do in our traditional morning offering, right? We offer our lives, our sufferings and joys of the day. That's what That's what he does here. So the bread, our toil is of itself, I know, but an immense fragmentation. So the bread is our toil, our action. This wine, our pain. He takes the wine as the suffering. So the action is the bread, and the wine is the suffering of all beings in the world at that time. Yet at the very depths of this formless mass, you have implanted a desire, irresistible, which makes us cry out, believer and unbeliever alike, Lord, make us one. So there's fire over the earth, is what it's called, this first part. Blazing fire, spirit, personal, substantial. The consummation of a union so immeasurably more lovely and more desirable than that destructive fusion of which all the pantheists dream. So there he is again, saying this is a personal thing, a transformative thing that is immensely personal. So, over every living thing which is to spring up, to grow, to flower, to ripen during this day, say again the words, this is my body. And over every death force which waits in readiness to corrode, to wither, to cut down, speak again your commanding words which express the supreme mystery of faith, this is my blood. So it's over the whole reality. So fire has penetrated the earth, he says. So the immense host, the supersubstantial word, through this word, the immense host, which is the universe, is made flesh. So it's the universe which is the very body of Christ. Through your own incarnation, my God, all matter is henceforth incarnate. And through our thoughts and our human experiences, we become aware of the strange properties which make the universe like our flesh. He's comparing the universe, the properties of the universe, to human flesh. Like the flesh, it attracts us by the charm which lies in the mystery of its curves and folds, and in the depths of its eyes. Like the flesh, it disintegrates and eludes us when submitted to our analyses. As with the flesh, it can only be embraced in the endless reaching out to attain what lies beyond the confines of what has been given us. So shatter, my God, through the daring of your revelation, the childishly timid outlook that can conceive of nothing greater or more vital in the world than this pitiable perfection of our human organism. In you all things subsist. Show yourself to those who love you as the higher soul and the physical center of all creation. Are you not aware that for us this is a matter of life and death? So 1,000 ways to lead you to this awareness. Successive initiations, gentle and terrible, which you have me undergo. Through all these I have been brought to the point where I can no longer see anything, or any longer breathe outside that milieu in which all is made one. So rich with the sap of the world, I rise up towards the spirit whose vesture is the magnificence of the material universe, but who smiles at me from far beyond. And lost in the mystery of the flesh of God, I cannot tell which is the more radiant bliss. Here we go again. To have found the Word and so be able to achieve the mastery of matter, or to have mastered matter and so be able to attain and submit to the light of God. Each illuminates the other. Speaks of the descent into the universal species. A truly real presence may it be. So we can say that this may become the body and blood through which the diaphany takes place. And finally, something we've already talked about in the previous one, the communion. The communion takes place. Remember, all communions are one communion of that Eucharist. So I stretch out my hand unhesitatingly towards the fiery bread which you set before me. Wherever life is leading me, filled with an impassioned love of Jesus hidden in the forces within the earth. Him the earth will lift up like a mother in the immensity of her arms and will enable him to contemplate the face of God. It involves a temporary collapse, not merely of all individual achievements, but even of everything that looks like an advancement for humanity. That's encouraging. If my being is ever to be as decisively attached to yours, there must first die in me, not merely the monad ego, but also the world. I must pass through an agonizing phase of diminution for which no tangible compensation will be given me. That is why pouring into my chalice the bitterness of all separations, of all limitations, of all sterile fallings away, you then hold it out to me. Drink ye all of this. And then there's a final prayer. And speaking about dissolution, we'll come back to that. I blindly believe the man who is filled with an impassioned love for Jesus hidden in the forces which bring death to the earth. In the earth will clasp in the immensity of her arms when her strength fails. And with her, he will awaken in the bosom of God. That's the new heavens and the new earth. It has to pass through the purification of the fire, for example, that they speak of. And then there's a final prayer to Jesus in all of this. And then finally, I'd just like to the third one is the Christ in the world of matter. And this was written in the trenches, World War I. And it's in the dialogue of a friend who was a soldier with him. And the first one is it's a picture. This is where you see the vision of Christ, specifically in all of this. The picture of the Sacred Heart. The picture of Christ offering his heart to all. And then he says, as I allowed my gaze to wander over the figure's outlines, I became aware that these were melting away. The outlines of this figure, of his face, they were melting away. No outline. They were dissolving in a special manner. The folds of Christ's garment, the luster of his hair, the bloom of his flesh, all seemed to merge, as it were, into the rest. This transformation began at one particular point on the outer edge, and it flowed on until it affected its entire outline. It was an aureole which was no longer confined to a narrow space, but radiated outwards to infinity. The entire universe became vibrant. All this movement seemed to emanate from Christ, and above all from his heart. And then his garments too, the transfiguration. No weaver's hand that fashioned them, unless the hands of angels or those of nature. No coarsely spun threads composed their web. Rather, it was matter. A bloom of matter, which is spontaneously woven a marvelous stuff out of the inmost depths of its substance. Matter is its cloak. I could see the stitches running on indefinitely and harmoniously blending together. And then you see that it was the unchanging face of Jesus there shone in indescribable shimmer or iridescence, all the radiant hues of all our modes of beauty, these innumerable gradations of majesty, of sweetness, of irresistible appeal, following one another, becoming transformed and melting into one another. And beneath them all, the incommunicable beauty of Christ himself. The whole face shone. And on then the portrait's eyes. Over the depths of the eyes, there were rainbow hues of reflection. All the glances that have ever warmed and mirrored back a human heart. The eyes that were first so gentle and filled with pity that I thought my mother's would be for me, became an instant later like those of a woman, passionate and filled with the power to subdue. So imperiously pure that their domination would have been, under their domination, it would have been physically impossible for the emotions to go astray. And then they changed again, became filled with a noble, virile majesty, like men of great courage. So different beauties in the face of Christ, masculine, feminine, all different emotional styles, is who Christ is and who we are. Which is why the blend of masculine and feminine traits is to have also an evolutionary goal. And so they also became the monstrance. They had the vision of a monstrance, from which radiates outward as well. And then the person's kneeling in front of that. And so you see the expansion of the host to the whole world. The whole world had become incandescent and itself become like a single giant host. Fibers were stretched to the breaking point. And there was a white glow active everywhere. And then it pulls back on itself, slowly contracting and bringing all its treasures back into its own center. So there was left a shimmering, glowing ember, shining pools. It brought it back into its heart. And the host was once again closed into the monstrance. So the monstrance is the same thing, branching out. Even the figure of a monstrance shows that, radiating out and then pulling back in. And the last one is the pyx. A soldier in the trenches holding a pyx, with the host in it. There was a sense, he says, when he gave himself Holy Communion, that there remained, still a separation. That the host was preceding him and pulling him in a direction. They couldn't immediately join him, not being able to penetrate or join to it. And he says what it felt like was the full extent and the density of the years which still remained to him. So there's still a sense in the host receding from him, the idea that he was not yet fully conformed to Christ, and it was a matter of the time he still had to live. So the time that we still allowed, that was still open to us to move into the transformation in Christ. I don't know why it is, he said, but for some time now I've had the impression as I hold the host in my hands that between it and me there remains only a thin, barely formed film. Soldier in the trenches. So that's what in fact happened. If I am destined not to return from those heights, I would like my body to remain there, molded into the clay of the fortifications, like a living cement thrown by God into the stonework of the new city. That goes back to what I was saying before. He saw the war as actually rebuilding of the New Jerusalem somehow in people's lives. So that's what he had. His intuition at that point, actually, in the. I'm trying to find that there was a passage here about where he mirrored the. Here it is. What struck me once in the novitiate was, and again something you seldom hear about, is in the first chapter of the book of Revelation, there's a description of the resurrected, glorious Christ among the lampstands. Remember that, with some incredible images of a sword coming forth from the mouth, eyes blazing like fire, and feet like burnished bronze, and the voice like the many waters, images from all across the scriptures. And it really struck me one day when I was a Jesuit and I was 18 years old. And it didn't really seem, no one else seemed to catch it, but here he mirrors that. He's clearly quoting that in what he describes as that glorious Lord Jesus Christ. The divine influence secretly diffused and active in the depths of matter. The dazzling center where all the innumerable fibers of the manifold meet. Power as implacable as the world and as warm as life. You whose forehead is of the whiteness of snow, from the book of Revelation, whose eyes are of fire, whose feet are brighter than molten gold, you whose hands imprison the stars, that's what the picture has there, you who are the first and the last, the living and the dead and the risen again, once I was dead but now I am alive, you who gather into your exuberant unity every beauty, every affinity, every energy, every mode of existence. It is you to whom my being cried out with a desire as vast as the universe. In truth, you are my Lord and my God. As he often says, his being sought, and all beings, all of us know, in Galilee, as he says a number of times, it has to be this Christ. who is the Jesus of Galilee, but like all of us in this world, fated to be and destined to be, upraised into the fullness of humanity and the fullness of God, transformed into Christ. And I want to, then we'll a little time for questions before we have the prayer. But I want to do a couple of the thoughts, especially ones to do with death. I don't want to be cruel. Most of us here are closer to death than to birth. Or closer to rebirth, than to original birth. So some of the things a couple of things he has to say about death, I think can also help us, and in the approach of death. But I discovered in thought number 4 here, the quote that I had on my preview which I now have on my bookshelf during my monastic life. Still the same original card, as you can see. What it says on the card is, "Now that I have in fact laid hold on you, Jesus, I realize that my deepest desire was not to possess you, but to be possessed." Surrender, which all of us need to allow happen to us all during different phases of our lives. The original quote, in its greater length, is, "When your presence, Lord, has flooded me with its light, I hope that within it I might find ultimate reality at its most tangible. But now that I have in fact laid hold on you, you who are utter consistency, and feel myself borne by you, U-R-N-E, carried by you, I realize that my deepest hidden desire was not to possess you, but to be possessed." And that's a prayer all of us should have in our heart in some form all the time. Before the 2 quotes on death, I'd like to just read what he has to say about love as the ultimate unifying force of the universe here, in thought number 72. "Only love can bring individual beings to their perfect completion as individuals, by uniting them one with another, because only love takes possession of them and unites them by what lies deepest within them. This is simply a fact of our everyday experience," he says. "For indeed, at what moment do lovers come into the most complete possession of themselves, if not when they say they are lost in one another?" Same with God, with us and God. "And is not love all the time achieving, in couples and teams all around us, the magical and reputedly contradictory feat of personalizing through totalizing?" That's the paradox. Personalized by becoming one with everything and everyone. "But why should not what is thus daily achieved on a small scale be repeated one day on worldwide dimension?" It's the whole structure of the universe in God's plan. Humanity, the spirit of the earth, the synthesis of individuals and peoples, the paradoxical conciliation of the element with the whole, of the one and the many. All these are regarded as utopian fantasies, yet they are biologically necessary. All right? Not just some spiritual task. Biologically necessary. It's all one law of being. It works, at every level here. So this achievement is biologically required. And once again, no distinction between nature and supernature. It's all one continuum. All one ladder of being, a hierarchy of being, as St. Bonaventure would say. And if we would see the made flesh in the world, what more need we do than imagine our power to love growing and broadening till it can embrace the totality of people and the earth? So that's our call and our goal. Okay, so a little bit on death and aging and all of that. Scripture quote, so it's in Latin. Mane nobiscum Domine quam ad vesperacit. That's from the Emmaus account. Stay with us, Lord. It is towards evening. Evening of life. Huh? So he says, assimilate utilize the shadows of later life. Enfeeblement, loneliness, the sense that no further horizons lie ahead. Discovering Christ, Omega, how to remain young, joyful, enthusiastic, full of enterprise. Beware of thinking that every form of melancholy, indifference, disenchantment is to be identified with wisdom. Make a place, an upward lifting place, for the end, which now draws near, and for the decline of one's powers to whatever degree God may will. To be ready has never seemed to mean anything to me but this, to be straining forward. Right, that's pure Gregorianism. This whole mystical theology is based on that verse from Philippians. Paul says, I'm not already perfect. One thing I do, I forget what lies behind, and I strain forward to what lies ahead. Epiphenomenos in Greek. I'm stretching myself forward. So that's exactly what he's saying here. That should always be there present within us, even and especially when our natural powers are diminishing. Remember the diminishments, the divinization of our diminishments. May Christ Omega keep me always young. Ad Maiorem Dei Gloria, the greater glory of God, the Jesuit motto. And what better argument for Christianity could there be than an enduring youthfulness drawn from Christ Omega? For old age comes from Him. Old age leads to Him. And old age will touch me only insofar as He wills it. To be young means to be hopeful, energetic, smiling, and clear-sighted. Accept death in whatever guise it may come to me in Christ Omega. That is, in the process of the development of life. That's what it's for. It's just another phase of life, the greater life. A smile, inward and outward, means facing with sweetness and gentleness whatever befalls me. Jesus Omega, grant me to serve you, to proclaim you, to glorify you, to make you manifest to the very end, through all the time that remains to me of life, and above all, through my death. Desperately, Lord Jesus, I commit to your care my last active years and my death. Do not let them impair or spoil the work I have so dreamed of achieving for you. The grace to end well, in the way that will best advance the glory of Christ Omega. This is the grace of graces. Live under the exclusive dominance of a single passion, the impassioned desire to help forward the synthesis of Christ and the universe. This implies love of both Christ and the universe, and more especially love of the supreme axis, Christ and the church. Communion in and through death, to die a communion death. We'll see that again in a second. What comes to me at the very end is the adorable. I go forward to meet Him who comes. And another one here on that. Now that I have learned to see you as He who is more me than myself, grant that when my hour has come, I may recognize you under the appearances of every alien or hostile power that seems bent on destroying or dispossessing me. When the erosions of age begin to leave their mark on my body, and still more on my mind, when the ills that must diminish my life or put an end to it strike me down from without, grow up from within me, when I reach that painful moment at which I suddenly realize that I'm a sick man or I'm growing old, above all, at that final moment when I feel I am losing hold on myself and becoming wholly passive in the hands of those great unknown forces which first formed me. At all these somber moments, grant me, Lord, to understand that it is you, provided my faith is strong enough. You who are painfully separating the fibers of my being so as to penetrate to the very marrow of my substance and draw me to your soul. The more deeply and incurably my ills become ingrained in my flesh, the more it may be you yourself that I am harboring, as a loving active principle of purification and liberation from possessiveness. That's my own being. The more the future lies ahead of me like a dark tunnel or a dizzy abyss, The more confident I can be, I go forward boldly relying on your word, of being lost, of being engulfed in you, Lord, of being absorbed into your body. Lord Christ, you who are divine energy and living, irresistible might, since of the two of us it is you who are by far the stronger, it is you who must set me ablaze and transmute me into fire, that we may be welded together and made one. Grant me then something even more precious than the grace for which all your faithful followers pray, to receive communion as I die. That's not sufficient. Teach me to make a communion of death itself. There's towards the very end of his life, a month before he died, Teilhard said that, basically my vision has not changed from 40 years ago, when he wrote these things. He says maybe a little less exuberant and new, but he still has the same passion as before. And I would hope that would be our not only our prayer, but our reality personally. That this great vision, or whatever, or however we formulate it for ourselves and however we live it, may not decline in passion, but may be kept ever young, as he's just said, by the power of the eternal, infinite Spirit within us. So, good. Well, I think that's more than enough. So we'll have some prayer time. We'll have a little time now for comments and questions, as well as a little later. We have 10 minutes or 15. So if anyone wants to comment on what we've heard, the last from the Divine Milieu, or now, or actually any of what we've talked about so far. Anyone have any questions or reactions? Yeah?
Father, when you first started learning this, did you find it very hard to understand?
Well, as I say, I didn't read the really technical stuff. What I resonated with the poetry, I resonated with the mysticism. I don't think I personally found it difficult to understand. There are different levels of what might be hard to understand. The concepts, the terminology, the mystical vision, the theology, the scripture. So I'm not quite sure. But you can ask yourself what's hard to understand. My suspicion is that we've done such a poor job of keeping this cosmic Christ in the forefront of our tradition and teaching it to 8-year-olds that's what makes it difficult. It's just like a whole world that we never discovered before, and it sounds weird or impossible or outlandish. I don't know what your reaction is for yourself. How many? Okay, I don't dare ask, but how many find it substantially difficult to understand?
It's deep. Halfway. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, you're yes and no. One of the reasons I'm doing it the way I am is that I'm trying to communicate the passion. I'm trying to communicate the enthusiasm of it more than the precise terminology. His terminology is not precise at all, and it is poetic. And it's part of the reason he hasn't been able to be fit into any particular pigeonhole. Is he a theologian? Is he a spiritual writer? Is he a mystic? Is he a scientist? Is he all these things? And of course we're all these things. Of course he's all these things. What's striking about him is that he was able to create a strikingly personal synthesis of all this, so that it made consummate sense to him personally to speak in this way. Yes.
You in the reading of the image was changing, transforming, transfiguring. Was he looking at it? He was in the church looking at that. He was having that experience.
Yeah, so it was like a mystical experience or a prayer experience of the expanding beyond its borders of the picture. and in the face of Christ. And then the monstrance was the same thing. In the,
And may I share an anecdote about his grave?
yeah.
I was an Army chaplain, Vietnam, so I was dealing with this issue of suffering, and I started more reading into Teilhard. This is about 1970. Discovered that his grave was just down the road at Hyde Park,
Yes.
St. Andrews.
Yes.
I went down there, and at that time it was still owned by the Jesuits.
Well, it still is, the cemetery.
Oh, the cemetery, but I mean the whole
Yeah.
complex. And the custodian of the cemetery was there, and he said to me that he was there when Teilhard was buried. An old fellow. He said back then in April 1955, there were 3 people at his burial.
Oh, yes.
Himself, funeral director who drove the hearse up, and a priest. And so there was just those 3. Now, this was 1970, and I'm looking at his stone, and the Jesuit stones to the right and the left were of the vintage of 1950.
Yeah.
But his stone was looking newer. This was in 1970. And I said to the custodian, how come his stone looks a little bit newer than the others on each side? And he said, well, when we first put the stone in, we misspelled his name.
I believe it.
And then he said, when people started to come to visit the grave from around the world,
Yes.
we had to put in a new stone with the right spelling.
I've never heard that.
You say
I'm not surprised.
you had heard that?
Not had heard that. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else?
Would you show the icon again and explain it to us?
Yeah, you can have a look at it yourself, but it's a picture of, a typical halo of, as I said before, of the one who is. All the icons of Christ in the Greek and Orthodox tradition have that, the one who is. So it's identified as Christ. Also, Jesus Christos, that's another thing that the Greek letters, which you also find in icons. So it's identified as Christ, but it's a flame. It's totally a flame. As you saw, and that's going to be what I'm going to say in my homily too. The fire is the central image, as you saw, the fire penetrating the whole universe. And the fire of the Spirit, the fire of the Sacred Heart, a flame. So it's all burning in his hands, or a flame too. And it's as if he has, the whole universe in his hands. And the planets, Saturn, recognizable, and the Earth right below him, and I think Jupiter off to the side, are around him. So it's inside the Christ so not just the Christ of the Earth, the Christ of the whole universe, the Christ of the solar system, the Christ of the whole Earth. It mentions the Sacred Heart was revealed to Margaret Mary, and then became popular among the Jesuits, and they sent it to Teilhard's own spirituality. It mentions the Mayan account of creation. The creator of all is called the heart of the heavens and the heart of the earth. So that fits in very well with Christ as the heart of the heavens and the heart of the earth. So the Mayan Christ bursts from the blazing heart of the cosmos, carrying his flame, reaching out, drawing all into his creative fire, is what it says. So I find that very inspiring. To realize that kind of dynamism is what characterizes Christ in his heart, in the cosmic dimensions of it.
No, go ahead.
I was just wondering about prayer. Does he talk about prayer in any of his books? Does he say, we should all be praying for each other, to raise the consciousness of all of us? Or
No, not that I've seen.
No, not at all.
Well, what you have is this prayer.
Okay.
I mean, what his effusions and his reflections are overflowing. They are prayer. They are prayer. And I say that's particularly Jesuit. To find right in the midst of your daily life, your prayer, the stuff of your prayer. So I may be wrong. At some point, he talks maybe more about prayer as something, but more often you just have his praying. His whole heart was ablaze, you know, seemingly all the time with the presence of God and the fire of Christ and the Spirit. So I think that's an ideal, a goal for us as well. But not have prayer as something we do at specific times, but prayer is something we are, which we receive from God. The Spirit interceding for us, which groans too deep for words, as Romans says. So that's it's an interesting point, though. Yes?
Two things, please. The icon, would we be able to find that online?
Oh, I think so. This is under Brother Robert Lentz, Lentz. Is that it? Robert, I think. He's a Franciscan now. He was out of the order for a while. Robert Lentz, Lentz. If you Google that, I'm sure you can find it. I know they're still for sale, these things.
And is there a YouTube or something that we could recommend for curious teenagers?
YouTube about what?
Chardin. About,
Well, my YouTube will be up, so. That's. I'll just remind people if they're interested in seeing my sermons and also this workshop and other workshops that I've given, including others that I've given here. Just on my website is my name, Michael K. Holleran. Thanks to Judy, not only for the recordings, but also for the website itself.
yeah, thank you.
To have that available. Otherwise, if you look up Teilhard Chardin on YouTube, who knows what you're going to find. I've never tried it, but you'll probably find something, other lectures or other, you know. Yes?
Yeah, I found, you know, like when you're presenting and so forth, and I understand it and so forth, but I really realize that Chardin jumps into my life, like if I'm bike riding, and I do quite a bit, and all of a sudden, you know, there's a scene, you know, and it's like, oh my God, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's when I really kind of like incarnate Chardin.
Right. Well, that's right in the midst of your daily life.
Yeah, it is, and you know, and it's refreshing to hear about him and so forth. But you know, so often Chardin is kind of in the here and now, you know. And
Well, hopefully always.
Yeah.
As we should be. One or two more, and then we can do some prayer. Yes?
At the beginning, you mentioned 4 concepts that are important to Chardin, and one of them was immortality.
Yeah, so it was earth, spirit, immortality, and personality. That's what he wanted to find in, you know, in any particular vision. That's from How I Believe, the book. There's a little treatise on How I Believe.
Say it again, please.
Earth, spirit, immortality, and personality.
Thank you.
Which he looks for in any system that could be really correspond authentically to the human condition and the human destiny. Yes.
Would you recommend for someone who's reading Chardin for the first time, which would be the case with me, start off with something like How I Believe?
Well, it's certainly accessible. It's not. I don't find it.
I'm not a scientist like myself.
How I Believe might be more interesting to a theologian or even a social scientist or political scientist, because he talks about, talks about the different systems that might. If it's someone who's looking
at book, which book would you recommend?
If it's someone who's looking for reasons to believe and something to believe in, that would be a good place to start. Yeah. If you're looking for looking for a book that would really present the powerful mysticism of Teilhard and his system, then I would recommend this book, The Hymn of the Universe. Yeah.
Hymn of the Universe.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, so why don't we we'll do some prayer, another prayer time, and then we'll have a break, and then
Yeah, we'll take a break and then we'll come back together. If you have questions that remain from the day, certainly share that. If not, I think Father Holleran would like to know kind of what you got out of the day, what touched you in particular. I've got one other question. If none of that works, I've got a couple questions in mind. But why don't we just leave it open for any questions that you may have, or in particular, anything you may want to share from the day that, a new insight or an inspiration, maybe looking at things a different way.
Yeah, comments, not just questions, or either one, both.
Got to mic it back.
Yeah, not knowing much about Teilhard to start with, I was just, other than getting seeing some secondhand comments on YouTube or something like that about him. It was just kind of fascinating to see this presentation of cosmogenesis up to Christogenesis, and to think that nowadays somebody thinks that there's a method to all this madness. I guess I just...
Which madness, you mean life?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, God has an idea, not one to be grasped by us, but kind of hinted at least, pointed to by Teilhard and others.
Yeah, it was fascinating. I don't know how wide, well, I guess you said at first he was sort of not quite put on a blacklist, but...
Put on the blacklist.
Okay. Okay, he was on a blacklist, and maybe he's gaining a little wider acceptance now?
Yeah.
Or, yeah, okay.
Including by the popes.
Great.
Yeah.
Maybe could you maybe just speak a little bit more to the visualization of activity? You talked about how if you were going to do something, then you wanted to do it with Christ in mind, or
No, with Christ's Spirit, with passion, with the passion of the Spirit itself. Yeah.
So
you don't just think about, okay, I'm doing it for Christ, and you're actually doing it with the Spirit. So that's the important thing. And yeah, a certain detachment from the result. I mean, you want the action, to be fruitful as an action, but you're not to commit. You're not. You won't stand or fall in terms of whether it's successful or not in human terms. That kind of detachment is also what he's talking about. And this cross traditions too. If you know the Bhagavad Gita, that's probably the major message of that from Arjuna is, just do your duty, do the thing, do what you're supposed to be doing, and leave the rest to God in terms of success or failure measured in human terms, human terms are always, if not erroneous, at least inadequate.
To follow up on your comment, is staying present and divine in your activity, is that the way to remain present so that, I guess, if our evolution is to become more and more of the Spirit, with the Spirit, as Teilhard said almost jokingly, don't denounce all matter because you'll die of salvation.
Yeah.
And you personally commented how in previous years you have been up there. This is a new notion to me, that you can get lost in that spiritual.
Oh, really? People like Carl Jung speak about it too, psychologically. You get lost in this process. You don't come up to the full light, but you kind of like it down there in the shadows,
I think any of us that are getting a taste of this, I mean, I like it more and more and want to do more, experience it more, especially when you get those divine glimpses.
But it can be the intoxication, and as he speaks about, it's ecstatic. But you have to realize, don't get stuck at any one level. Realize, get a certain sense of how far there is yet to go, and not be so mesmerized by any particular experience. I say that in Zen too, but certainly in Christianity. Be grateful for what you receive, but don't cling to it. That's true whether you're talking about, your dinner or talking about your spiritual banquet.
you say more about the crucifixion in light of Jesus taking on our suffering and our sin? Because I'm still hearing from the pulpit, the 12th station of the cross, we did this to him.
Yeah. I think that kind of guilt trip is not helpful. I'm trying to understand it more in terms of openness to the suffering, including sin, as part of the suffering of humanity. And, according to Isaiah 53, he took on, our suffering and our sins as well. What I've really come to realize, and then it's very much in conformity with what Teilhard is saying, is that was not some arbitrary thing that the Son took on because the Father told him to, and it's some special thing because he was God, or because he had some special mission that he took on the sufferings of humanity. Because he was human. Because he is human. Therefore, he's connected to all the sufferings of all the people of all the world, and their joys and hopes and desire, all the things that were said before, and quoting about all the communions of the world being one communion. So that's who we are. So Christ took on all that, and what redeemed the world was the fact that here was finally a man who, because he was God, and therefore saw and was fully energized by the Father, was able to take that on in a way that was transformative. That quotes, equals redeemed the world, saved the world. Not because the Father was angry and had to be placated, but simply because working through the suffering and the sadness and the depression and the sin of the world in that particular way, which was not punitive, not fully accepting, no recriminations, no complaints, no violence in return for violence, but total forgiveness and total understanding. Which is what his teaching was too. Love your enemies, do not resist evil with evil. That's what redeemed the world. In other words, what allowed the Spirit to enter into the full depth of human experience, descending into hell, in other words. Going out into the very depth of human darkness, all those shadows. But because it was done in pure love, in pure pardon, in pure compassion, in pure self-gift, in pure self-offering, finally, a human being who did that, the God-man, that's what redeemed the world. So, and he did it because he was the image of God. He did it because he was God and because he was man. In other words, that's who God is. God is pure pardon, pure love, pure compassion, unbounded and unlimited and uncalculating love and pardon and joy and compassion. That's who God is. So the Father's did that already, not awaiting to be placated up there in heaven, by a perfect sacrifice. This is what I deserve, But Christ was the face of God in the world, and the face of what a human being should be. He was created in the image of God, and there should be reflecting God. So if you want to know who God is and what humanity is, look at Christ, which is pure, unbounded love and self-gift. And because he lived that through the darkest part of the darkest dimensions of human life, that's what redeemed the world. And we simply follow in his Spirit and do the same likewise, hopefully, by living in pure pardon and love and compassion and joy. So it's not useful to say, I think it's not helpful to be laying that kind of guilt trip on people. Well, what you start by saying is, and one of my teachers said this very well, you start by telling people, you're a radiant being of divine light and love and compassion. Live up. I'll show you the way to live up to that. And overcome whatever you need to do so you can have that joy and that vitality and that energy purified and harmonized, in your being. Start by telling them how wonderful they are, how beautiful they are, and then by saying, so how are you doing with that? And then address the issues that are preventing us and them from living from that depth and living from that level of joy and authenticity. And that's what we mean by the grace of the Spirit. That's what we mean by overcoming sin. All the obstructions and all the obstacles that prevent us from living in that fullness. So the cross was taking on that full dimension of human life and transforming it so that it became the resurrection.
Can I follow up on that?
Yeah.
I'm totally with you on rejecting atonement theology.
At least as it's been
But
understood.
what does the word redeem mean then?
Well, I agree with you. Salvation, redemption, atonement, expiation.
Yeah.
It's not talking to people today. It's not in today's vocabulary. So what we need to do is find a different way of presenting the truth of all those things contain truth. You know, redeem, to buy back. Well, you're not buying back from the devil or from the Father, buying back from the Father. What you're doing is reclaiming our fullness of our humanity, the fullness of our humanity by reintegrating all those energies that have been destructive or lost or that have not been integrated. So we have to find a better vocabulary for that, which is, you know, so when you want to be saved, well, that means being saved from all this disintegration of our being and having the fullness brought back. We're saved in the sense that we're made whole. We're made whole. And that's a way we could say it. So I agree. We depend way too much. Teilhard would agree. We depend way too much on formulas. He even quoted that earlier. We're just repeating formulas without knowing what it means, and what it should mean, and what it can mean for us. So yeah. You know, if you see somebody on the street corner saying, "Repent," you know, Jesus died for your sins. What? What does that even mean? You know, it's not helpful. Except maybe to spark people to say, yeah, something's wrong in my life. Maybe there's a message here for me. But the message has to be communicated properly if it's going to really be redemptive, salvific. You know, it's really going to be transformative for people's lives. Yes.
Could you touch on how he was, Teilhard was a brilliant scientist as well? I mean, he was a paleontologist that was very well published and very brilliant in the traditional scientific way.
Well, it's important to realize that, yes, and it comes through in his biography there. When he was doing his studies originally, you know, even before the doctorate, you know, his mentor, his tutor, said that he's one of the most brilliant minds he's seen, you know, and he was really impressed with him. So, as a scientist, right up to the end of his life, he was very well respected. Yes. So even though some of his writings, you know, scientists can't follow him all the way to Christogenesis, but in terms of his purely scientific writings, he was very, very, very competent and respected. Yes, it's important to realize that. Yeah. Good.
Question. Hard for me to phrase this. You said serendipity, things happen. Synchronicity. Yeah. Synchronicity. Also, those things have happened in my life and people I know, and sometimes you feel like, quote, you're led to this and all that. How does that fit in with this? What you're talking about with Chardin and the science and the compassion, the praying, the feeling compassion for someone, and then something may be wonderful. How does that all work into this?
Well, I don't know. You have to see each person's experience. You know, maybe someone has a response to that.
You know, is God connecting with you along the way? I mean, because it's our.
Of course, God is connecting with you at every second if we are awake to it. And as Teilhard clearly in his life was trying to surrender more and more, moment by moment, to what was going on in his life. And he voices that many times, you know, especially where it might seem more difficult to accept what was happening to him. He called for more and more surrender because only God has the big picture. So the more we get in the way, and that's partly what contemplation is for, to take on the mind, the consciousness of Christ, so that we're seeing things through God's eyes, you know, and not just through our own human norms and expectations and complaints and desires and biases and all of that stuff. So you'll see, one sees, the more one reaches that level of consciousness, the more you can see the transparency of your life and what things mean and how things are connected and how people are connected. And maybe respond more readily to those challenges and more deeply. Yes, then we'll get back to you.
So thank you for answering half of my questions. I like this whole image that's developing because I love the description of starting out with this pure light of energy, and we all fall in the ditch from time to time and wonder how we got there. And now all you have to do is turn on the TV and you fall in the ditch. So, it's constantly this question of how do I sustain the consciousness that I reach for in contemplation, and how do I become that light and continue to be that light when the ditch is looming large and you don't want to go, Okay. And we have these instinctual reactions the minute things come to us that happen before choice.
Yes.
But I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit more about centering prayer and Zen meditation and the power of things like yoga, exercise, and breath, the things that strengthen us to be aware and to be able to make choices and stay out of the ditch.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot there, but realize, we already are this. We already are the light of God. What Richard Rohr calls the immortal diamond, our true self. And it's simply a matter of connecting to it and staying connected to it. What this lady was saying earlier, it's about living what Eckhart Tolle calls the power of now. To be fully present in the now, fully present in the moment, is what our challenge is, what contemplation is. So not only is that a technique, it's the content. The now is not just a matter of trying to wait, but the now itself contains everything. It's the eternal now.
Yeah.
And this is very Zen. To be fully present right here and now means that you're present to what Teilhard was talking about, to present to everything and everyone of all times and all places, including the absolute, including God. So if you're really here, you're everywhere, all times and all places, because it's God. You're sharing God's nowness, God's eternity, which, by the way, is the way eternity was defined back in the 6th century by Boethius for the Christian community. The simultaneous fullness of being, which is God's fullness of being right into the eternal now. That's what eternity is. So eternity in heaven is not a really long time. Looking at God. It's the fullness of life right here now, which never passes. The divine life in us and as us. We're looking at it. We are it. So all these other techniques, whether it's centering prayer or Zen, or Kundalini chakra work, or whatever it might be, Tibetan meditation, they're all meant to further this type of consciousness and awareness. Some of it is more, like the chakra work, is more directly focused on purifying the individual energy centers so that they can become aligned and dynamic and harmonized and focused. Zen goes more directly to the whole vision itself, allowing it to be to work from the top down, so to speak. And centering prayer, and breath work, both Zen and centering prayer can and do use the breath. Why? Because it's out of your head, out of your image, out of your feelings, right to what is most immediately and organically your life, your breath, life breath, the spirit. That's why it's so primordial and so central in so many traditions, including those. So the more you do that, the more that consciousness becomes accessible and habitual, so that it's not just a plateau, peak experience. It becomes a plateau, to use Maslow's language. It becomes a level that you live with that's readily accessible to you the more you go on with it. And so the more that's true, the more you can immediately connect to it because you're so familiar with it and it's so close to you, the more even our instinctual movements, start to be incorporated into that. If you have something negative, it takes a split second before it's back again, back reintegrated. It's what the Carmelites spoke about as first movements. At the height of mystical marriage, even those instinctual movements are in accord with the spirit, which is pretty high. But just below that level, the divine engagement, or whatever you want to call it, you may have an initial movement contrary to this, but it's so quickly reintegrated that it's no harm done, so to speak. So the point is that the more you advance in this, and it takes years, I mean, let's be honest, but the more you advance in this, the more you habitually live in this, and the more you can access it in your daily life. So it is possible to have that kind of transformation. Whereby you are contemplative in the midst of action, whereby you are continually awake, to pray always, as both Paul and Jesus remind us. That's what it means to have the heart awake, your mind illumined, your presence complete in the now, and sharing the life of God.
I appreciate your excitement about being in the here and now, and two things. One is in a graduate program that I was involved with at Boston College, and I felt so privileged to be there. And what was this all going to be about? It was a clinical psych program, and so they were going to show a movie, and it was like, oh wow, this could be great. And the movie was with Jack Nicholson. And it was incredible. And
which one?
The One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And about empowering people, and that's exactly what he was doing. And the other one with Sylvia, I know Sylvia with her question about the presence of God. If anybody has ever read The Hound to Heaven, Francis Thompson's poem, and God pursues you down the labyrinthian ways of life. And he was kind of an outlaw himself and then ran into problems. But it was speaking about God as the hound to heaven, pursuing us, never like letting us alone if we commit a mortal sin or something. It's just like constantly pursuing us. And it really is, there's a lot of liveliness in it, and beautiful about the unconditional love of the transcendent for us.
Where can I go from your presence, or where can I flee from your face, as the Psalm 139 says. I mean, God is giving us life and love at every second in the center of our being, so how can you can't run away from that?
Right.
And plus, that's what the hounding is. God can't run away from that either. That's who God is.
Yeah.
So it's unstoppable. We can't try to think of the right word, but it's not something that can be prevented at all. Yeah, constantly streaming. Yeah.
Irresistible.
A good phrase.
I was always concerned that the Eastern, when my friends would get involved with Eastern religions, that it would be less Christ-centered.
Well, I mean, it can't. If his vision is true, if Christ at the top enlivening the whole universe.
Well, this seems very Christ-centered. I meant in general.
Well, there's no other world.
Okay.
So if they're pursuing a spiritual path, well, they're encountering Christ whether they recognize it or not. And they don't have to recognize it. I use that. In a couple of my homilies recently, I've used that because we had the reading from John 14 where it says, "No one comes to the Father except through me." Well, I use the image of St. Catherine of Siena about the bridge, Christ being the bridge between us and the world and God. So I compared it to the Golden Gate in San Francisco. So if you're going to cross from one side to the other, you go across the Golden Gate. I mean, there's no other way. No one can come to the Father. No one can come to whatever it's called. What's it? Yeah, well, except by the Golden Gate. That's so obvious. But you don't have to know it's the Golden Gate. That's what it's called. You just cross it. And how do you cross it? Well, love, compassion, pardon, peace, all those, the fruits of the Spirit, the Beatitudes, that's how you cross it. And that's who Christ is. So whether you know that it's Christ or you just practice those things, you're crossing the bridge. Whereas, if you're maybe a Christian can stand on the other side and say, I know that's the golden gate. That's Christ. And then they sit there and they stay on that side and they don't cross the bridge. They think they're saved because they know it's Christ. No.
Great.
Not all those who say, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. So that's what I would say. Christ and the Lord and only people. They work together. They're not in competition.
You okay?
There's no competition in the spiritual world.
You just crossed the bridge.
You went for a swim. Got the microphone out of that.
Paul Lindner, who was on the faculty at Union Seminary,
Oh, we're good friends.
put it this way, that Jesus' way is open to other ways.
Yeah.
So if you are a follower of Jesus, but are not open to other religious ways, then you may not be a follower of Jesus.
Very well said. Very well said. As I say, there's no competition in the spiritual world. They all work together.
Amen.
Amen.
Speaking of that, it just suddenly dawned on me. I remember the first time I read Thich Nhat Hanh, Living Buddha, Living Christ, and when he talked about the Eucharist, I was so overwhelmed I almost didn't know what to do with myself because it struck me so deeply, and I had never heard it spoken of that way before, and I have such a respect for him. And I really got a sense of what you just said. They work together.
Yeah, and it works, when I do interfaith work, when I encounter some people who really obviously had deep spiritual experiences, I remember speaking with one rabbi once, a pretty well-known fellow, and I said, okay, all right, the way you're talking, you've met Jesus. And of course he had. But of course he still stays within his own tradition, and that's fine. But if you're open to it, you'll meet all these guys up there. Not just guys.
Bear with me.
Right?
There's a lot of good saying.
You guys know what I'm saying.
Well, what we've been saying, somebody said it's the truth, it's this. It reminds me of, I am the way.
Yeah.
I am the truth.
Yeah.
I am the life. So whatever way you want to call it, it's
Yeah,
another
you're
name.
meeting Christ, because... Anyone else? You might want to also just share your own impressions. Doesn't have to be a question. But we have a few more minutes, I guess.
A few more minutes.
Again, yes? Someone hasn't... Yes?
Just one little sharing, something you said this morning, because in listening to all this and kind of preparing for today, it's like, well, what does this mean in terms of how do I live?
Yeah.
And you said, live to forward the synthesis of Christ in the universe as your single passion.
That's
So
what he
thank you
said.
for that.
Yeah, no, he said that. Yeah, I was quoting him. Yeah.
I just wanted to thank you for your time and knowledge that you shared with us. It certainly has stretched me in terms of going deeper.
Stretch yourself out. Yeah.
Stretch myself out. And it's a good place to be because it can be exciting. A little
yeah.
scary at times, but that's where trusting God
Well,
comes in.
part of excitement is being scared.
Hi, I subscribe to your YouTube podcast, and some of the audio is so difficult to understand.
Especially the early ones. We've improved that in the last year or so.
Well, that's when I stopped listening, because I used to have these Zen moments when I had no idea what I fill it in. I was really enlightened by your presentation.
Right within the last year, right? That's when you get a better sound quality.
Right.
Plus, we just fixed the sound system in the whole church, so that'll make it even better. But I know it's true. In the early days, it it was kind of difficult sometimes to hear on YouTube.
I imagine. But what I really wanted to offer was, as I understand it, string theory says that what is always has been, always will be,
Yeah, energy
and
is
always and everywhere.
Mhm.
That it?
Yeah, all the
Is
energy
that
is
correct?
essentially stable, yes.
I mean,
Transforms in various ways, which is part of the joy of the divine dance. String theory, yeah. We behave like both waves and particles, separate and connected. Anyone else? Okay.
Wrap it up, yeah. All right, well, thank you. Thank you. And if you